So I've already covered a lot of ground relating specific population characteristics to conflict. And in this section, we have two more sections. I want to talk about the importance of the urbanization, the unparalleled urbanization we've seen over the last 50 years, and what links that might have to conflict, and then bring together all these disparate strands related to population pressures, youth bulges, urbanization, and a history of conflict, as well as other factors related to water, purity, and scarcity, to talk about the Gaza case, unfortunately. Before I do that, in this segment, we have two lecture questions, which tie into two different aspects of today. I think for me, when we talk about interactive relationships, and in the youth bulges article, but also in a lot of the path diagrams we've seen so far, a lot of these relationships are interactive in our mental models of the world. And I'm interested to see if you can think of any other interactive relationships that might explain youth bulges links to conflict. That article is now getting a bit long in the tooth. Can we think of any other factors that we could interact with youth bulges to try to better understand this kind of correlation? Because these youth bulges don't appear overnight and they don't disappear overnight. However, you only see conflict onset in certain times in certain places. So what other factors might be necessary that garlic that we can connect to these blocks? Please answer on Waddle when you get a chance. And I wanted to move on now to talk about the unparalleled amount of urbanization the world has witnessed over the last 50 years and where we're likely to head going forward. In recent years, the majority of the world's population now lives in urban centers. As of 2014, 54% of the world's population lived in urban areas, 3.9 billion as opposed to 3.4 in rural areas. Where these urban centers are, of course, are not evenly distributed around the world. Australia, we are 86.25% urban. We're very, as we saw in that graph earlier, a very urban society, even more so than North America or Latin America or even Europe, while Asia and Africa has less than half of the population living in urban areas, though, of course, that is also changing quite recently, and we're going to see a dramatic increase. This is where you saw that inflection point in the last 20 years, and you can see the growth here in different regions around the world. This is a UN report from a couple of years ago now, but you see with Africa and Asia, you have that additional speed of urbanization take off. You see a relative leveling off in Oceania and Latin America and the Caribbean. We don't see as many people moving to urban areas from rural in Australia as other regions are around the world. So what countries are actually contributing to this and what are likely to in the future? India, China, Nigeria in sub-Saharan Africa, Pakistan, the DRC, but also with the United States as well, often driven by migration. So what political effects is this urbanization likely to have? How could this lead to conflict? I think there's a couple of different ways that you could do it, that we can connect urbanization to conflict. The first we'll see in the Gaza example is due to scarcity, especially fresh water. I come from Los Angeles, and we're going to see in the Water Week in a couple of weeks that it has been an ongoing challenge and a source of political tension for providing enough water to Southern California, where all the people live, from Northern California, where all the water, until recently, it still disproportionately comes from Northern California, but there's a huge aqueduct funneling all the water from Northern California to Southern California, which can cause grievances and an unequal resource allocation that can become contentious, especially also when farmers get a huge amount of water when for agricultural production, when that water is not available for individual needs. My family's had to live through a number of different periods of rationing water and having limits on when they could do certain things and how much water they were allowed to use. So urbanization can lead to scarcity. Goldstone says that urbanization is not matched by job opportunities and economic growth. So if you have a whole bunch of people moving to the urban center and they don't have those job opportunities, like with Greece, Spain, and other countries I talked about in a previous video, that could lead to an increased risk of violence, both because of potential motivations for violence as well as lower opportunity costs, and social and cultural changes that can come in urban areas when people aren't as tied to traditional social structures that could also provide an opportunity for violence. And so you connect that to the Homer-Dixon path diagram from a couple of weeks ago. You see that population growth can lead to scarcity, which can lead to migration to urban areas, but that scarcity can also travel with individuals that scarcity can continue. And so urbanization, there really hasn't been as much research on the effects of urbanization on conflict. I think this would be an area in which I've seen a couple of works looking at urban street fighting and subnational studies of urban areas and conflict, but they don't really have a strong theoretical connection to either government activities or individual behavior. It's more just correlational rather than argumentative. So I think for me, this is a brief kind of section because I think it's an developed area of study. It's something that people have talked about. Urbanization is reaching high levels. This might theoretically make the world more conflict prone, but we really don't have strong evidence for that in similar ways to what we've seen with other environmental factors. And so I think urbanization has this dual possible link to conflict, that urbanization can make it easier for people with grievances to coordinate, to attend meetings, and to act on their grievances, and they could be potentially better able to coordinate, but it also makes it easier for governments to monitor and control their citizens if they're in a more geographically centered area. It could also make it easier for them to provide services. Rural areas, it can be incredibly difficult to provide water or irrigation or education or other services to citizens as opposed to an urban area. So you have these contrasting pressures that could lead to why there hasn't been maybe obvious implications for the effect of urbanization on violence. And I do think I'd be interested to hear your approach. Do you think urbanization is an important driver of conflict? If not now, maybe sometime in the future? And how would we know which one of these contrasting pressures, opportunities for coordination versus opportunities for governments to observe their population, how these can both be true at one time, and what kind of state should be at risk for this kind of urbanization effect? So please leave your comments in the lecture question on Waddle if you're responding to the lecture questions. And with that, I want to end with the Gaza Strip case study. I think it is one also that hasn't gotten as much attention in recent years as other cases. In this class, I've tried to talk about the cases that there are research on, like in Rwanda, but then also other countries and cases from Burundi to Turkmenistan to the Gaza Strip that don't get as much attention, but then in the Australian system or in others, but then also are long-term strategic challenges both for government services as well as people's lives on the ground. And I've included a couple of brief videos that connect the Gaza Strip to the ongoing conflict between Hamas and Israel, with the ongoing challenges of providing services, including clean water to the citizens. And I think it is a visceral kind of reminder of the stakes and the characteristics of highly dense urban areas with people with insufficient resources, how that might drive scarcity and potential motivations, or just conditions that could be conducive to violence. So let's turn to that.